Well, Adam, thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege, particularly as last year you won our Future Leaders Award with the Green Building Council, and we've had such a great time working together. So my name's Davina Rooney. I'm the CEO of the Green Building Council, and I have the wonderful job of working with industry as we transition industry towards sustainability. So what does that mean? We have a vision of positive, healthy and resilient places delivered through the built environment. And we have the privilege of working across industry, government, manufacturing, the whole suite to try and bring that vision to a reality. So for me, I've had a fabulous, but, shall we say, diverse career. So I started in consulting engineering. I started working for a tiny little structural engineering firm during university. Got to work with a global giant Arup in Sydney, in London with Arup Associates, their division that incorporates architecture, and then got to work in the Indian Himalayas before coming back to Sydney. And then Arup released me to what was then AusAid to work in Pakistan after a quake. And after that, I went to work with one of our partners, Stockland, and I had a variety of roles over a decade at Stockland, either running capital budgets, running sustainability, and my last role brought the two of those together, which was the General Manager of Sustainability and Corporate Procurement, and I've had the privilege of being in this role for a year.
Yeah, awesome. So it's a really unique moment we find ourselves in, probably the most crazy, I've experienced in my lifetime. From your perspective, how does the COVID-19 pandemic teach us about our relationship as human beings with the planet?
Look, I think there's a few lessons here, and let's be clear, there's a few different paths we can follow. So we can either sort of say we've had a global financial shutdown, and then we can turn around and actually do whatever we can to get out of this financially as quickly as possible at no cost, at whatever cost. However, the thing that really excites me is that this experience has led a lot of people to understand quite a lot more about vulnerability. So we used to show the top 10 global risks from the World Economic Forum. 6 of those are related to sustainability. They're related to limits of biodiversity loss, climate impacts, extreme weather events, all those brought together. But guess what number 10 is? A pandemic. Right? And so, when we showed that a year ago, if you told someone a global pandemic would change, the world economic order, people would have said, we've got the World Health Organization, we've got policies, we've got hospitals, we'll be fine. And I think what this crisis has shown many of us is vulnerability. And so the idea that we don't actually have a systemic response to all problems, the idea that challenges can happen. And I genuinely think that that is one of the things that's been missing in the sustainability conversation. Often we've approached, over decades, certain individuals, and the answer to everything, what will we do, will be that technology will solve it. We've, had an overbelief in the ability of technology. Now, I don't think that that's the case anymore. The thing that we're seeing is there's a new understanding of vulnerability, and quite excitingly, we've seen, not led by environmental groups, but social movements around how people feel really strongly about the clean air, or how people feel really strongly about, starting to see, wildlife come back to certain regions. And even more impactfully, scientists have come out and said that the pandemic was caused by biodiversity loss and us bringing wildlife trafficking in more contact with human trafficking, and the idea that these kind of viruses, whilst ever we continue at the rates of biodiversity loss, are going to be far more prevalent. So the thing that I would say is there's some really clear signals that have reached a lot of people, and there's a new understanding and a new appreciation. However, it's the role of us in the movement to take this time when we step back, this time of introspection, to really provide a pathway for what an alternate future can look like. So when we are in this crisis, we sort of talk about there being a protect, pivot, rebound stage. So obviously protect, absolutely where Australia was in March and April, absolutely focused on the hospitals, absolutely focused on fiscal stimulus, and you can see a bit of that obviously still now. Where currently, predominantly, I would say in the pivot stage, how we actually reconnect and do things differently, how we reimagine things. In podcasts like this, normally you and I would be sitting down in the same location. We're doing this differently. We're pivoting, and the Green Building Council is doing this a lot. But what's really important is that we spend this time planning for how we rebound. How do we actually have a sustainable transition? How do we ensure that the projects that we're fast tracking planning of actually are held to higher account and actually have some accountabilities for the stimulus that they've been given?
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on, because despite being number 10 of all the global risks you said last year, the amount of stimulus happening right now just to overcome the impacts of COVID-19, it's absolutely unprecedented. So do you think this kind of provides an anchor for the kind of stimulus for the other real risks that are coming in the future, like climate change, and what opportunities are there right now with this stimulus, do you think?
Well, the challenge is with the stimulus is we've got to be able to whistle and walk. The aim is, yes, we're using stimulus for a short-term financial issue, but which are absolutely appropriately. However, for every stimulus dollar, we want it to be hardworking. So not only do we want to create a short-term financial stimulus, but we want it to drive us in the direction where we're going. And what's been really heartening talking to task force around the country is their focus on using the short-term stimulus to deliver long-term goals. So I'll give a tangible example of that. We've been speaking really closely. I'll use the example of the the Victorian COVID task force, who absolutely have one of their criteria as their long-term carbon goals, as well as their financial stimulus goals. And so what they're doing with the projects that they're fast tracking is requiring higher accountability from them through sustainability certification to make sure that someone's checking the outcomes, and that if at a time that's needed, you get a boost one way, there's an accountability to do better. Now, what that means is that it's actually the short-term investment is a long-term investment in our generation's future. And so I think that's kind of the language that we have to be using, is using the short-term stimulus to actually make change for the future. If we wait till after this is done for a new round of climate stimulus, that may be too late. And as we know, the environmental challenges are urgent. So we need to use this time and use the tools we have to actually work within the system.
Absolutely. So our carbon targets are to get to carbon neutral by 2050, to limit by 1.5 to 2 degrees, which is obviously not good at all, but hopefully not Armageddon kind of levels. How do you think we're tracking in Australia and say around the world in reaching these targets?
Well, there's no sugarcoating this. Currently, the metrics are going the wrong way. And whilst carbon neutral for 2050, is the critical goal, it's an overarching carbon budget. We can't actually do nothing till 2049 and then hit zero. We'll have passed our tipping points a long time ago. And for those of you looking at the IPCC curves, those curves are becoming steeper and steeper. So carbon neutral by 2050 in property space, which is the context that we're discussing, that really means all new buildings carbon neutral by 2030, and a large amount of the existing stock carbon neutral by 2030. And then the harder to abate sectors, as in the ones where we don't actually know all the answers yet, they're the ones that we need to be gliding in the last few years. And so when we look at that, what do we mean by harder to abate sectors? They're embodied carbon, or what we call upfront carbon, within building materials are often the harder to abate sectors. So we're advocating with the World Green Building Council the goal of 40% reduction by 2030 and 100% by 2050. And I can't tell you how excited I am by industry's response to that. So since we put out the call for action with the World Green Building Council last year, we had InfraBuild step up and make a net zero for 2030 commitment in steel, which is just extraordinary. And then we've also then aimed time, the other things that we're seeing at the same time is we have our first carbon neutral cement coming on the market, which, if you absolutely look at that, that is such an extraordinary turnaround. I couldn't have been any more excited when Wholesome told me that they were getting Climate Act certified for, some of their cement products. Game changer. So what we need is, the big plans, but then we need the interim plans and we need the pathways by which industry is going to get there. And also, importantly, a number of us need to get together and do those in a concerted way with combination of voluntary tools, long-term pathways, alignment with government. So it creates the right ingredients, the Goldilocks ingredients, for there to be the right business case for industry to change, because these changes mean investments by key businesses and we need to work towards the right climate for those.
Yeah. And with that kind of certainty, the business case for doing something like your green steel and your green concrete, which, might be a little bit more upfront now, but over time it's going to have a clear benefit. And then also, obviously from a timber point of view, getting the supply chains ready to be able to supply sustainably the full amount. So embodied carbon is a very exciting area.
And you're right, timber has some natural advantages in this space, but we have to look at how we sustainably scale whilst managing, the complexity of the species impact that wraps around it. So these, when you talk materials, there's never a simple answer. And so, I think the real benefit of the long-term planning is to actually enable those industries really appropriately to have the time and space to work through the complexity of issues and move in a sensible and sustained manner. One of the challenges we've seen is if there isn't the right, if there isn't the Goldilocks ingredients, we sometimes see knee jerks where one part moves forward and something else becomes challenged. The thing that we've learnt about sustainability problems is that they're wicked problems. And if you resolve part of it, but not another piece, it's that second piece that comes to bite you. So laying out long-term plans and long-term pathways to invest in these areas is really critical.
Yeah. And on this topic, what is the role of offsets, speaking to someone, say, who hasn't come across offsets before, and how can these be utilised in this transition?
Yeah, so I think, I look at offsets as something that is a catalyst while we help move things forward. So we should always absolutely look at reducing, then we should look at reusing or, renewables, and then we should look at offset for those difficult to abate areas where we actually don't have other technology solutions. And, the role of offsets is going to change very much over time. So when we used to see carbon neutral buildings, a period of time ago, now we're very much seeing now that it's possible to do a highly efficient building powered by renewables, we're predominantly seeing offsets used for things like refrigerants that are really complex. So I think that they're, a real transition support, and we have to be really clear that offsets are often for wonderful projects like trees, the lungs of the earth, that are actually keeping us going at these times. So whilst on an individual project scale, we should absolutely be looking at dealing with the fundamentals and then working through offsets. We have to acknowledge, as per the Climate Active standard, which is the key standard in Australia for carbon neutrality that we certify under and very much partner with, offsets definitely have a role as we get to zero. But it's really worth thinking about. That helps us cover while we actually go through transition areas as we really work through technology solutions to some of the complex and hard to abate areas.
In your role, I'm sure you are always putting out the case of sustainability to developers out there to build better. Putting on the developer hat for a few seconds, and how would you say to them, put the case to them, the business case to actually building better and the risks of inaction in that sense?
Well, I spent 10 years making that case to a developer in a development context. So it's an environment I'm really familiar with. So look, one thing that I encourage people making the business case is don't be afraid to hit them with the numbers. So when we look at, I've got the figures for the Green Building Council. We've done some research work with MSCI PCA on their Green Property Index. Our latest figures from them say that a new Green Star building will have a 5% higher valuation, 13% better income. Tenants will stay longer. That's over 25% weighted average lease expiry, or a WALE. And so you've got this building and it costs, from our latest assessment, 1 to 3% more to build it better, and you immediately get 5% better valuation. So this is based on our research in office buildings, which we have the most of, so we're doing the most research. We're really excited to broaden this research, but, I'd first hit them with the numbers we have. Second of all, I'd say, without actually validating things from a risk perspective, how do you know you really did it? So if you're doing a design and construct contract, everyone at the start of projects has the best ideas and they've got the best intentions. I haven't seen a single project that started with those intentions that didn't put in checks and balance mechanisms actually achieve them at the end. Simply put, if you did a uni course and they said, study the course, there'll be an exam at the end, but we're not going to mark it. How would you study differently if someone was giving you a pass or fail at the end, or if nobody was marking the exam? Now, I know the difference. That's right. That's right. Your commitment to completing it would be very different. And in all the examples where someone, decided not to be certified, and then we went back and for some reason they said, look, I'm sure we'll have it at the end, we have been unable to validate a single one of those examples, because the fact that nobody thought the exam was being marked actually changed the performance on site. So I'd say to someone in a development hat, it's, going through a process is the only way you really know it happens. And all the research with neighbours on mandatory disclosure validates that. What gets measured gets managed is the old antic. And the other thing that I would say to developers now is, with the rise of the task force on climate-related financial disclosures, the new versions of Green Star is actually having mandatory requirements around resilience. And that's something that, everyone is going to be required to describe. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this as a metric, it's basically a global financial metric. It came down from the Financial Stability Board that was set up globally after the GFC to look at the top financial risks. And then going back to the World Economic Forum, the fact that climate change is up there as one of those risks, this is to try to translate to a property level what a company's doing about it. Because if your building that you're valuing for 30 years is going to be wiped out, then you should have some very different liabilities on your balance sheet. Otherwise, you're overvaluing your company. So there's actually a requirement for people to actually start understanding these things. Now, everyone can create their own approaches, which, isn't going to be the best solution, or we can come together as an industry and design those.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So the value side of the equation is, 3 to 5%, and the extra cost is only 1 to 2%. Is there any more work we can do on the cost side, the 1 to 2%, to just stack the equation even more in the right direction?
Yeah. So what we find is it's about 1% for our 4-star buildings, or best practice. And it's 2 to 3% for our 5-star, which is Australian excellence or world leading practice, sort of 6-star. So yes, there absolutely is. One of the things we're seeking to do with the new tools is we're bringing in a bunch of minimums. And the idea is we'd love to work with industry to mainstream these minimums so that any contractor coming onto any job knows, right, we're actually going to have to use, water efficient taps and toilets. So let's just standardize our procurement ranges. Let's standardize our specs across all jobs. So, and to be frank, if you've got a good range that does this, why would you use something worse? Why would you step backwards? And so one of the aims that we're going after is more sustainability, more streamlined documentation. And, that's the thing we want is it to be easier to pick up the right product at the right time. And the other thing we're looking at is how we go more digital into 2021 to actually make things easier for industry. Because again, we want more sustainability and less focus on, easier focus on documentation to bring these things forward. So the aim is the same high sustainability standards, but more of a glide rail through streamlined procurement, streamlined documentation. And that's something we're really keen to have as a discussion in industry. Another thing that we're working on is sustainability got really complicated a while ago. And so what we're trying to do is do a whole bunch of work on where the global sustainability trends are, translate that to property, and then bring that into tools or guidance papers. So an example of this is the Sustainable Development Goals. For our new tools, we're mapping every credit against a sustainability development goal. So we can give you a Green Star report validation, and then we can give you a Sustainable Development Goal impact report. So how do we make sure that the many sustainability professionals are actually spending their time doing game-changing work in that area and less time reporting? How can we support our partners to streamline that pathway? Because we've got a lot of people out there doing the right thing, but at the moment there's opportunity for process enhancement so that we can make more change at scale.
Yeah, I think a lot of sustainability consultants would be very excited hearing that part, so they can focus their time on, where their passion really lies, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And part of this is really about, it's going to be a journey. It's not going to be a light switch. But if we all have that as our main aim, that we create a simpler glide pathway to best practice and then spend our time on the amazing changing innovations to move industry up the scale, that's where we all want to be.
Yeah. One of the important things moving forward will obviously be the building codes. So what do you see is the role of building codes, and how does the Green Building Council help the building codes develop themselves to meet these ambitious targets also?
Look, I'd have to say the work with the building codes has been the most exciting advocacy evolution that I've seen in my career. So I never thought, that I would see a day when, the Green Building Council, Property Council were getting together to advocate for change, or where we see all of industry through ASBEC, the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, pull together and lean in with government and industry for a streamlined change that industry can digest one piece at a time. And I have to give ASBEC, the Australian Sustainable Built Environment Council, a huge amount of credit, because what they did was create streamlined pathways. Look, and it started with some of their 2016 reports, low carbon, high efficiency, some seminal works that they did that really set roadmaps. And one of those was creating pathways for the National Construction Code. And then they did research work down every pathway, partnered with industry and government every step of the way. So the first thing that we've seen out of that is National Construction Code 2019. We saw what is estimated to be a 35% enhancement in one go for every sector apart from residential, came in 2019. And at the moment, we're working really hard, with government and industry on a change for residential, which is currently considered National Construction Code 2022, which is meant to be another game-changing step forward. The thing that many people don't know is that COAG agreed that we should be aiming to have all codes as net zero for 2030. So that's that same pathway that I was talking about that we're aligning to, so that we can hit Paris, bringing that forward. And our role is often to show how the leaders can get there and help transform industry to create a safe pathway and a streamlined pathway for government, so that we can actually lift best practice and then regulate worst practice, and all the boats can rise with us. And across sustainability, that's where all of our focus has to be, is how do we get all the boats to rise?
How exciting. As we're moving now toward the end of the podcast, there's obviously a lot of younger people who might, love the opportunity to hear from your perspective, advice you've got for anyone who's a bit younger and looking to make some, positive change in their career on the goals of sustainability that we've been really talking about?
Yeah, look, a lot of people ask me, how did you get to do so many cool projects when you were young? Like, how did you get to work on the job in the Indian Himalayas? And the secret is that I found a really busy professional that I admired doing fabulous work, and I offered to do work for them for free on the worst part of their job.
Mm-hmm.
So when I started at Arup, I was doing, structural engineering work, and I was desperate to do work for the sustainability team. So I went and begged the great leader, Heiko Scheppers, I'll do anything. I'll do the worst of work. I'll do all the drudge work. I'll make it work around my schedule. You don't need to negotiate with anything. I'll make it happen. Now, Heiko gave me phenomenal opportunities. When I was working for this great project in the Indian Himalayas, I came in and was like, you guys are a really busy team. You actually just need someone to copy the drawings, start doing some of that work. Where you've done all the great thinking, you need someone to translate it from the leadership building to the boring building behind. I'll do that and you can review it, because it was all volunteer work. So we're all doing it in our own time. So the thing that I would actually say is work out the area that you'd like to be in and fake it till you can make it. So offer to do some work for free. Sometimes senior people, they seem really intimidating. Anyone who's really good actually wants to grow your career. And so find a way that you can help them. And it won't be saying to them, next time you have a really senior conference, why don't you step out and I'll run this one for you? It could be saying, you're doing some work here. I know you've said you're doing work here in the future. Can I go do a literature review for you? Look, if anyone wants to offer to do any literature reviews for me, reach out, let's do it together. But the idea being that you find a gap where you can genuinely help someone that you'd love to work with and find a way to do it on top. A lot of people come to me and say, I'd like to immediately get a senior job in your organisation. And I kind of say, I really adore you and I adore where you want to go, but there's a gap in your CV. How do we look at your CV now and build the experience that you'll need so you get the next job in 18 months? People are really strategic about their projects, but they don't always put the same vision and forethought into their own careers. So I'd encourage people to step back and you don't need to know exactly where you're going. I don't need you to name the job in 5 years that you want. I think that's a little bit old school. But which direction do you want to go in, and what's a positive contribution that you can make from where you are today that takes you in that direction?
That's such good advice. Absolutely love that. Thank you, Davina. And just before we go, the Green Building Council shows up to a lot of different projects at the moment and events. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening and where people should go if they want to find out more?
Look, to be honest, we have so much that's exciting at the moment. A collection of things. We really recently launched a residential strategy. So if you look up Green Star Homes, you'll absolutely find that. We think that at the moment, how we bring people together and how we gain consensus is really important. So we've got the Green Building Day coming up on the 16th of June, and we really encourage you to get involved, reach out. All the information is on the Green Building Council website. We'd love to have you along. The other thing is we're launching some new tools around Future Focus that we call Future Focus, which is kind of the future of where we see sustainability strategy going. But the thing that I'd say is get involved, get engaged. If you have some feedback on how we can do things differently, great. Let's talk about it. Reach out to me, reach out to the team. But the aim is, if we want to change everything, the vision that we want, we need to bring everyone with us. So reach out, let's have a conversation, and let's do more of this together.
Thanks so much, Davina. I'll leave it there. That was absolutely amazing.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I look forward to keep working together. And can I just say, having had the privilege to work with you for over a year, Adam, after you won our role, it's just so great to see Wood Solutions doing this, and it's really fantastic to see you, shining a light on important areas in your role. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Davina. It's a privilege has been mine. Absolutely.